In a rapidly shifting political landscape, two recent stories highlight the challenges and strategies facing the Democratic Party as it seeks to reclaim lost ground in traditionally conservative regions and respond to the concerns of voters disenchanted with the current Republican agenda. One story unfolds in Paintsville, Kentucky, where the Kentucky Democratic Party is undertaking a rural listening tour aimed at rekindling connections with voters in predominantly white rural communities. The other tale emerges from New Jersey, where gubernatorial candidates are positioning themselves against the backdrop of rising discontent with the Trump administration and its policies. In Paintsville, a small Appalachian town, the Kentucky Democratic Party is attempting to bridge the divide with local voters who overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump in recent elections. Chairman Colmon Elridge, addressing a gathering of around 24 residents, emphasized the need for Democrats to re-engage with rural communities where they have lost significant ground. "The gut check is we'd stopped having these conversations," he acknowledged, highlighting the party's realization that it cannot regain power without appealing to a demographic that has historically leaned Republican. This outreach effort is underscored by the stark reality of recent electoral losses for Democrats in states with substantial rural populations such as Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia. With projections indicating a potential loss of 12 seats in the Electoral College due to population shifts, the urgency for Democrats to reconnect with these voters is palpable. Elridge pointed out that even if Democrats do not win outright in these areas, they can chip away at Republican margins. A strategy that proved successful for Kentucky's Democratic Governor Andy Beshear in previous elections. The gathering in Paintsville served as both a town hall and a cathartic release for attendees who expressed frustration over the Republican agenda. Retired teacher Sandra Music, who identified herself as a New Democrat, voiced her dissatisfaction with conservative policies threatening public education, while others lamented the growing influence of Trump in the region. The dialogue revealed not only local grievances but also a desire for an alternative narrative that resonates with the experiences of working-class voters. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, the Democratic gubernatorial candidates faced their own set of challenges as they prepare for the upcoming primary election. Each candidate is keenly aware of the need to address the affordability crisis exacerbated by Trump-era policies. Congressman Josh Gottheimer emphasized the urgency of lowering taxes and addressing rising utility costs, framing his agenda around the everyday concerns of voters. How do we get taxes down? How do we get costs down? How do we get life more affordable? He posed, reflecting the sentiments of constituents anxious about economic pressures. Other candidates such as Newark Mayor Ras Baraka and Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop have similarly positioned their campaigns as a response to the frustrations of New Jersey residents. Baraka seeks to recenter the party around working-class issues, while Fulop aims to fix infrastructure woes and challenge the Trump administration's policies head-on. The overarching theme among these candidates is a commitment to affordability and a rejection of the perceived elitism that has characterized the party's recent history. As the Democratic Party navigates these complexities, it is clear that both rural and urban strategies are critical for its revitalization. The successes or failures of these outreach efforts will likely shape not only the upcoming elections but also the party's long-term viability in diverse regions. In Paintsville, the effort to rebuild trust with rural voters may serve as a test case for similar initiatives nationwide, while in New Jersey, the candidates' responses to affordability and grassroots concerns could redefine the state's political landscape. Looking ahead, the Democratic Party faces a pivotal moment. Its ability to adapt to the changing needs and sentiments of voters in both rural Appalachia and urban New Jersey will determine its path forward. As the party continues to grapple with its identity and mission, the outcomes of these grassroots efforts may illuminate a way forward in reclaiming the hearts and minds of a diverse electorate. In a rapidly evolving political landscape, the Republican Party is witnessing a significant schism, particularly highlighted by the ongoing situation in Ukraine. A group of Maryland veterans disillusioned with the party's current trajectory has joined the national coalition Republicans for Ukraine, which aims to reaffirm the GOP's traditional support for democratic nations against authoritarian regimes. This coalition, launched by the nonprofit Defending Democracy Together, has emerged as a platform for conservatives who still advocate for U.S. assistance to Ukraine amidst a growing sentiment of isolationism within the party. Among the veterans is John Ronning, a 71-year-old former submarine officer who recalls his Cold War service on the USS Bluefish. He is incensed by the Republican Party's shift away from its historical role as a defender of freedom. "I felt like I played a small part in bringing down the Berlin Wall and setting the captive nations free, including Ukraine," Ronning stated. "So it's kind of extremely upsetting to see my party standing in the way and saying, 'We don't care what Russia does to Ukraine.'" The Republicans for Ukraine initiative provides a platform for members of the party to express their support for Ukraine, featuring testimonials from veterans like Ronning and Jim Naylor, another member who grew disillusioned with the GOP since 2016. Naylor, a Marine Corps veteran, reflects on his ideological journey. "There's nothing left of the Republican Party," he lamented, drawing a stark contrast between the party's current stance and its previous commitment to democratic values. This initiative has garnered attention due to the increasing number of GOP members who oppose direct support for Ukraine, a reversal from the party's historical support for freedom and democracy. The coalition's website grades Republican House members on their support for Ukraine, sending a clear message that many in the party still believe in a strong U.S. presence on the global stage. The ideological divide was further emphasized during a recent Oval Office meeting in which former President Donald Trump criticized Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, suggesting that Ukraine's actions could lead to World War III. This rhetoric has alienated many traditional Republicans, prompting them to question their alignment with the party under Trump's influence. Ronning and Naylor's experiences illustrate a broader trend of disenchantment among traditional conservatives. They argue that the party has strayed from its core values, particularly in relation to foreign policy. The coalition seeks to remind the party of its foundational beliefs, emphasizing that supporting Ukraine aligns with American interests and values. Vladimir Putin is an enemy of the United States and should be treated as such, the coalition asserts, urging Republicans to reclaim their legacy as champions of democracy. Looking ahead, the future of the Republican Party remains uncertain as more members grapple with their identities amid a changing political environment. With a growing number of veterans and former party loyalists rallying for a return to foundational principles, the GOP could face significant internal challenges as it approaches upcoming elections. The question remains, will the party reconcile its past ideals with the current populist wave, or will factions like Republicans for Ukraine continue to push for a return to a more traditional interventionist approach to foreign policy? As the narrative unfolds, it is clear that the fight for the soul of the Republican Party is far from over. In a significant political turn, Senate Republicans are pursuing changes to the GOP's ambitious legislative agenda, often referred to as the Big Beautiful Bill. This comes at a time when the party is grappling with internal divisions and external pressures, particularly regarding its stance on environmental regulations and trade relations. The recent developments highlight the complexities of navigating a political landscape marked by competing interests and the desire for a cohesive party strategy. One of the most impactful moves came when the Senate voted to block California's pioneering rule aimed at banning the sale of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. This legislation, which was championed by California Governor Gavin Newsom, aimed to position the state as a leader in the transition to electric vehicles. However, the GOP's decision to overturn this regulation reflects a broader commitment to fossil fuels and a pushback against what they perceive as overreach by state governments. Newsom criticized the Senate's actions, stating, "This is not about electric vehicles. This is about polluters being able to pollute more." This sentiment was echoed by Senator Adam Schiff, who highlighted the implications for states' rights to legislate in their own interests. The implications of this decision extend beyond California, as approximately a dozen states have historically followed California's lead on environmental regulations. With vehicles being a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, the Senate's actions could substantially influence national trends in automotive manufacturing and environmental policy. Meanwhile, the debate around this issue has intensified, with Democrats accusing Republicans of prioritizing the oil and gas industry over the health and safety of citizens. The legislative maneuvering involved a narrow exception to the filibuster, allowing Republicans to advance their agenda despite previous assurances that such procedural changes would not be pursued. In another noteworthy development, Senator Amy Klobuchar recently met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to discuss trade relations. Reflecting a bipartisan effort to restore stability and credibility following years of tumultuous interactions under former President Trump, Klobuchar, part of a bipartisan delegation, emphasized the importance of the U.S.-Canada relationship, stating, "We share a deep bond grounded in trust and a shared commitment to democracy." The discussions come amid ongoing tariff disputes that have strained trade ties, and Klobuchar's calls for collaboration underscore the need for a unified approach to international commerce. Meanwhile, Senator John Fetterman has been navigating challenges related to his mental health, an issue that has been politicized in recent weeks. After facing scrutiny for his attendance record in the Senate, Fetterman has returned to fulfill his duties, albeit reluctantly, stating that he felt shamed into participating in what he described as performative tasks. This predicament illustrates the delicate balance between personal well-being and public service, with Fetterman expressing frustration over the media's portrayal of his struggles. His experiences resonate with broader conversations about mental health and the stigmas associated with seeking help, raising questions about the pressures faced by public officials. As these developments unfold, the GOP is at a crossroads, grappling with internal factions and external critiques while attempting to maintain a coherent legislative agenda. The outcomes of these discussions and decisions will likely shape the party's trajectory in the coming months, particularly as the 2026 elections approach. With climate change and mental health at the forefront of national discourse, the Republican Party's ability to effectively address these issues may prove pivotal in securing voter support. As political dynamics continue to evolve, all eyes will be on how these legislative maneuvers influence both party unity and public policy. In a notable turn of events in U.S. politics, the House of Representatives narrowly approved a sweeping tax cut bill aligned with President Donald Trump's key legislative goals, marking a significant win for House Speaker Mike Johnson. The bill, which passed by a razor-thin margin of 215 to 214, now heads to the Senate, where it is expected to face further scrutiny and debate. The vote was not without its quirks. Amid the tension of the all-night session leading up to the vote, New York Republican Representative Andrew Garbarino inadvertently missed his chance to support the bill, having reportedly fallen asleep in the back of the chamber. "I'm going to just strangle him," Johnson joked about his colleague's mishap, while Garbarino expressed frustration at missing the vote. "I was moments away from the House floor to vote yes when the vote was closed." Despite this setback, he remains optimistic about the bill's future as it progresses through the Senate. The tax cut legislation encompasses a range of provisions aimed at stimulating economic growth, which proponents argue will benefit middle-class families and small businesses. However, skepticism exists regarding the long-term impacts of such sweeping tax cuts on the federal deficit and public services. Republican dissenters in the House, including Representatives Thomas Massie and Warren Davidson, raised concerns about the potential for increased national debt as a result of the bill. As the bill moves to the Senate, it is poised to encounter a different political landscape. Legislative experts are already predicting a contentious debate, particularly around the bill's fiscal implications. The reconciliation process, which allows certain budget-related bills to pass with a simple majority, may also face challenges under the Byrd Rule. This rule restricts the inclusion of provisions that do not directly affect federal spending or revenues, potentially complicating the tax cuts journey to becoming law. Meanwhile, in a separate but equally significant development, the U.S. House also passed a controversial proposal within a federal budget bill that could impose a 10-year moratorium on state regulation of artificial intelligence (AI). This provision, dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill, has drawn sharp criticism from industry experts and state officials alike, who argue it undermines state sovereignty and hinders efforts to create necessary safeguards against potential AI-related harms. Travis Hall, director for state engagement at the Center for Democracy and Technology, expressed concerns that the moratorium would tie the hands of state officials seeking to enforce regulations that protect residents from AI-generated threats. In a letter opposing the amendment, 40 state attorneys general warned that such a broad prohibition could expose citizens to various risks, including misinformation and data security issues. Proponents of the moratorium argue that it would create a more uniform regulatory environment, reducing the complexity of compliance for technology companies operating across multiple states. However, opponents counter that effective governance requires local insights and flexibility, particularly in rapidly evolving fields like AI. As both pieces of legislation make their way to the Senate, the political dynamics will be closely watched. The outcomes could significantly influence not only the economic landscape but also the regulatory framework governing emerging technologies in the United States. With fierce debates expected, the coming weeks will be pivotal in shaping the future of both tax policy and technology regulation in America. In a landmark decision that underscores the ongoing debate over the intersection of education and religion in the United States, the Supreme Court has upheld a ruling declaring the proposed Catholic charter school St. Isidore unconstitutional. This ruling, which emerged from a challenge brought forth by the Oklahoma Supreme Court, maintains a critical separation between public education and religious institutions. The Supreme Court's decision, delivered on May 24, 2025, resulted in a tie vote, effectively affirming the lower court's ruling without offering an explanation. This lack of commentary adds an element of intrigue to a case that has implications for the future of charter schools across the nation. St. Isidore, which was sponsored by the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City and the Diocese of Tulsa, aimed to operate under the Oklahoma Charter Schools Act. However, the Oklahoma Supreme Court determined that the school was an instrument of the Catholic Church designed to further its religious mission, thus violating the state constitution's prohibition against using public funds to support religious institutions. Justice James Winchester, in his opinion, articulated that St. Isidore is an instrument of the Catholic Church operated by the Catholic Church and will further the evangelizing mission of the Catholic Church in its educational programs. This assertion led the court to conclude that such a charter would inherently conflict with the constitutional mandate for public schools to remain free from sectarian control. Moreover, the court referenced the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which bars public institutions from compelling or expecting student participation in religious activities. The ruling sparked intense debate, particularly among those who viewed it as a restriction on religious freedom. Defendants argued that denying the operation of a religious charter school infringed upon their First Amendment rights. However, the Oklahoma Supreme Court maintained that St. Isidore could not be considered a private entity seeking equal treatment under the law, as it was a creation of the state and reliant on public funding. Justice Dana Kuhn, dissenting, argued that the ruling favored non-sectarian entities over sectarian ones, potentially undermining the principle of religious freedom. She asserted that sectarian organizations could, under certain circumstances, contract with the state to provide educational services without violating the Establishment Clause. Kuhn's dissent highlights the complex balance between maintaining public education's secular nature and protecting religious entities' rights to participate in the educational landscape. The implications of this ruling extend beyond Oklahoma, as it raises questions about the future of similar charter school initiatives across the country. The American Civil Liberties Union (ACLU) welcomed the decision, with Daniel Mock, the director of the ACLU's program on freedom of religion and belief, stating, "The Supreme Court's ruling affirms that a religious school can't be a public school and a public school can't be religious. This sentiment was echoed by ACLU National Legal Director Cecilia Wang, who emphasized that public schools must remain secular to welcome all students regardless of their faith. As the legal landscape surrounding education and religion continues to evolve, this ruling may set a precedent that influences how charter schools are structured and funded in the future. The ongoing discussions around the separation of church and state in educational settings will likely remain a contentious issue, especially as various states consider new charter school proposals. What remains clear is that the Supreme Court's decision has reaffirmed a critical constitutional principle, ensuring that public education remains a secular domain while simultaneously igniting further debate over the rights of religious organizations in the public sphere.